Welcome back, everyone, to the main stage of the BYP Network Leadership Conference. Wow, day one is already coming towards an end. This will be our last keynote speaker, and then you get the opportunity to just stay with the corporates on the expo booth. It is a careers fair, so literally they are hiring, so don't forget that. So register your interest with them, and they'll be in touch, and also get to know them by asking some questions. And as you know as well, there are some sessions going on. So do check out the sessions. Otherwise, stay here with myself and with Suli Breaks. So let's just get into it. This is for me to really just leave the floor for Suli. He will introduce himself. He has a keynote for us and also a poem. And then at the end, I'll ask him some questions. But actually, I'd rather you ask him some questions. So make sure that throughout his keynote and his poetry, you're writing some questions down, and then I'll just fire them his way to answer. So yeah, I'll leave the stage for you, Suli.
Cool, man. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Yeah, it's super interesting for me to kind of communicate with people virtually in this capacity because like there's no feedback. I usually have like super interactive sessions where I pick out someone in the crowd and just troll them, or if someone tries to heckle me, I'll just be dissing them internally, and that will give me the vim to carry on. But yeah, this is a very, very interesting setting. I appreciate everybody taking their time and coming through. Like coming through. Well, we're not really coming through anyway. I'll tell you, doing a session at home is very weird because usually like I need to go to the toilet, but I'm thinking, can I go to the toilet? I'm about to go on stage, and usually when you go to the toilet, you're worried about cleaning up after yourself, but I don't have that dilemma. It's a very weird. Like even now, if I wanted to fart, I could do that and no one would know. Um, I just wanted to get that off my chest early and kind of express my internal thoughts before I get into the more external productive talk. So my name is Suli Breaks. I'm a poet. I'm a writer. I'm a creative entrepreneur, but I like to say creative hustler. I'm very much into entrepreneurship, very much into business, investing in startups. Helping startups grow, consulting, and then at the same time building my own platform. But day to day creativity takes up a large part of my priority and a large part of my output. It's super. This is mad therapeutic. I feel like I feel like I'm just talking to myself. This is cool. So for me, I want to touch on something today, which is kind of an intersection between creativity, professionalism, and entrepreneurship. I feel like it's a theme that transcends or kind of permeates through every single one of those things, and that's the concept of storytelling. I feel like so often we've overlooked the power of not just storytelling, but our own stories in specific settings, and a lot of you may think it's easy for me to say because I'm a creative. I get on stage, I talk to people, I jump on YouTube, everybody's listening, like, subscribe, turn off the camera, get my check and keep it moving. But it's not like that, because what I've realized is in no matter what settings you are confident with your story, you will always be challenged on that story. And the power to own your own narrative essentially gives you so much leverage, and me and my wife do an event in TEDx Peckham. It's a TEDx event in Peckham, and one of the themes 2 years ago was a seat at the table. And we've all heard this thing about getting a proverbial seat around the table, but then the power in creating your own table is something that I feel like we're very intimidated by, and we overlook a lot. I've actually pulled up two quotes. Normally I'd had a bit of a slide, but I have two quotes which I think are very powerful. It says, "Story, as it turns out, was crucial to our evolution, more so than opposable thumbs. Opposable thumbs let us hang on. Stories told us what to hang on to. Good stories surprise us. They make us think, feel. They stick in our minds and help us remember ideas and concepts in a way that a PowerPoint crammed with bar graphs never can." And I think this is something that I've learned through my journey. So a lot of you may be thinking, how does this pertain to me? So maybe I'll go into a bit of my journey, and then I'll elaborate on the wider narrative of storytelling and give an understanding of how people have used it to shape their own futures, which would be the theme of the poem at the end: create the future. So the story, my name is actually Daryl. So I was born Daryl, but the story of Suli Breaks actually begins in 2009. 2009 is when I graduated from the University of Sheffield with a law degree. I graduated, but don't get gas. I just managed to pass. Let's not hype up the thing like that. I passed decently, but I don't want people to be thinking out here that I could have been in Suits or working for what's that? Annalise Keaton. I wasn't know how to get away with murder kind of graduate. I was a standard law graduate. I graduated, and I was faced with a choice. I'd started doing this creative kind of spoken word, live performance, hybrid stuff, which was like a non-existent, or I was faced with the option of pursuing the more traditional law path, which was in somewhat a sense available to me. In this first instance, I decided to choose my own story, craft my own narrative. So I took the creative path. Fast forward to 2011. Following my own narrative, I'm a cleaner. I'm a cleaner in Virgin Active Wood Green. So you guys can imagine how that went. I'm still performing. I'm still doing my thing, but I'm like legit a cleaner, and I wasn't like one of these like half-hearted cleaners. Some people come past with like the duster and sweep off the machines and a towel here and there, and I was really, really in the trenches of cleaning. This is a bit of a digression, but yeah, I mean, just to show you how deep I was in the cleaning, I remember once I went into the shower and I smelled something. I went into the shower, I smelled something. I go into the shower and the smell is getting a bit heavier as I go into the shower. This is a shower, not a toilet. We get inside there, yeah. I open the shower door, you pull it back, it's like a movie. And I go in there and there's a lump of excretion. Somebody's excreted in the shower. You know what I mean? And that was my job to clean it. So I'm telling you, I was really in this cleaning trenches. During this whole process, one of the things that kept on being reaffirmed to me or reiterated to me was like, my mum was always like, you should do this law thing. You should go back to your degree. Like we had fights, I'm from Ghana, so you can imagine how that experience would have been. I don't need to communicate that to everybody. In that process, I was saying to myself, somehow I'm going to make this creative venture or creative path that I'm taking work in my favor. But I didn't know how I was going to do that. So then this is when I jumped on YouTube. YouTube 2010. This was not the YouTube it was today. It wasn't content creators giving away Gucci bags. You know what I mean? This was people in their room doing what I'm doing right now. Probably that's why it feels more natural, talking to a camera. This was when people would say, "Are you sure you're okay, fam?" It's a bit weird, like there's only a few people doing it. The first thing I was able to really harness in the YouTube space and was able to leverage was firstly the fact that I was unique, but it was the first time I really understood what owning your story meant to me as a creator, as an individual, as a business, as an entrepreneur. They'd probably call it your niche, but I'll put it in this context and I'll keep it brief. It's like when you think about Adele, she's about to drop a new album, you're able to relate her to a specific theme, which is heartbreak. You know what I mean? I don't know how she patterns it. She managed to get divorced just in time for the album release. Dope. When you think of someone like Snoop, Snoop is weed. He's a smoke. So I remember sitting with my sister one day, and I was watching a Taylor Swift video. I enjoy Taylor Swift's music. It wasn't by chance. I was generally watching. I enjoy the old Taylor Swift music. So I'm watching the Taylor Swift video, and I remember seeing a comment underneath, and the comment said, Taylor Swift can relate to everything that a 15-year-old girl goes through. And I was like, this is interesting. So when people listen to her, it sounds like common sense now, but they see themselves in that conversation. And in the context of that, I remember my sister saying to me, you remind me, I don't know if this is a compliment or a diss, but she was like, you remind me of like a failed student. You went through all the educational system and you came out and failed. Maybe it was a diss in hindsight. Yeah, at success in some capacity. I channeled that, I internalized that, and that became my brand. That brand became Suli Breaks, who would talk about education, talk about like everything students and my peers were going through. I started to put that into my content. Fast forward to 2012. I had my first viral hit. Some of you may have seen it. It's called "Why I Hate School But Love Education." That video went off. It went off, shut down the internet, shattered it into pieces completely. Every school, every student, and it changed my life. From then working with big brands, Microsoft, Facebook. I don't want to say too many competitors because I'm working with different ones. At NASA. So all over, I traveled all over the world. It's given me a voice. And what it made me realize is Stories create trust, stories create identity, but also they create credibility. And there's no limit into the settings in which that credibility can actually exist or be leveraged. So in 1976, a man called Bill Bowerman, I'm not sure if you lot are familiar with him, he wrote a book called Jogging. This was a time in America where jogging wasn't like a cultural, not thing, it was like a cultural thing. The only people that ran were athletes. So if you were seen running, it was kind of like, what are you doing? You know what I mean? I'm sure some of you can relate to it, you know, like it's not really a normality, especially like in African culture. What's that? I saw this joke where it said, someone said they don't jog because it says that in the Bible it said only the wicked run when nobody is chasing them. So, but anyway, off topic. So, he wrote this book called Jogging, and then as a result of that, a lot of Americans started to incorporate running into their everyday lifestyle. Bill Bowerman was in the process teamed up with a guy called Phil Knight. You guys might be familiar with him, but they went on to build one of the biggest athletic sportswear brands in potentially human history. That brand is called Nike. I'm sure you guys are familiar with Nike or Nike. Nike. So I call it Nike because I was working for Nike during my hustling periods. I actually got fired by them. Life is funny because I got fired by Nike for making a video on YouTube, but then in the past three weeks I've been working on a campaign actually with Nike, making videos. So yeah, anyway, so I'm digressing, but the power of owning that narrative around running allowed them, even though they never mentioned running, Nike once in the book, allowed them to shift the cultural mindset and able to incorporate their product into that. In 1894, John Harvey Kellogg, I'm sure his name's a dead giveaway, he created a bland tasting cereal that was supposed to help people in Insantium with mental health problems. That didn't work out, but what he found was that it could be used as an alternative product, which could be like a breakfast cereal. At the time, breakfast wasn't really a thing. So what they did was they took out marketing in lots of magazines and they put out the phrase that breakfast is the most important meal of the day. So we grew up with that embedded in our psyche, but that is not an actual reality. That's A1 marketing, that's A1 story leveraging and creating. So I've said a lot, and I guess a lot of you lot are wondering, how does this pertain to me, especially if I'm in a professional setting? I'm not trying to bust on YouTube, I'm not trying to do that. I know this because after doing everything that I'd done and on everything I'd accomplished, I came into a position where I was very fearful of telling my story. And this starts with the first startup I ever worked with is a startup called Cano. They're more popular now because they're working on the project with Kanye, the Steam player. I just want to say I've had some hand in that project, but you know, this is not a clout game, you know what I mean? This is just and what was interesting, I remember the guy who was my mentor, he'd bring me into those meetings, and for some reason my mouth would just go shut. And the weirdest thing is, I'm sure a lot of you have been in this situation before, where you're in a meeting and you know all the answers, you know what I mean? Or this is what you do, you've done all of this before, but for some reason you feel unqualified, or you feel like, how do I communicate my voice in a way that they can understand? You know, how do I make it palatable to the audience? A lot of people say this phrase, fake it till you make it. I'm not saying don't fake it till you make it, because the game is the game. But when you fake it, it's often trying to tailor yourself to someone else to allow them to perceive that you can do the job that you can already do anyway. A lot of us are normally qualified to do stuff, but because it's been framed in a certain context or put in a certain place, we often feel like we have to adapt ourselves to fit their narrative of what makes us acceptable. And that's how I felt in the first few meetings with Cano. It came to a point where we did so many projects and I had so much input or understanding in certain places, but I was so afraid to communicate. And I started to realize, what is my fear in this situation? Well, that came apparent to me when we started attending. So I work with a lot of startups, but also sometimes VC and investment firms, etc. So we attend some their deal flow. I'm not sure how many people on the call, but some people may not know what a deal flow is. A deal flow is when you look at the portfolio of all the companies they want to invest in. So you're just seeing millions here, 10 million here, 15 million here, 20 million here. And I'm just sitting there thinking, rah, are they going to bust me on some of this money? But outside of that, what is interesting is in that same setting, companies would come up and people would turn to me and say, "What do you think about this?" And I would go on mute. I couldn't understand where that came from. And the final straw in the situation was when we was looking at a company. I was called into a meeting to look at a company. I won't disclose the name. And the guy got up and he pitched. It was like a creative company. He did his whole pitch. And I thought, this company is whack. This makes no sense whatsoever. I'd love to tell you that I found the confidence to put my foot down, and it went in slow motion. And I was like, no, this is what's wrong. No, instead I watched everyone else ask the relevant questions and them get championed. After that, I remember going home and saying to my wife, why is it that whenever I'm in these spaces, I can't seem to kind of like communicate everything that I know, everything that I study, everything that I'm really, really well versed in, because entrepreneurship and business for me is not only something that I've lived, but it's also something that I study. And she said to me, it's because you don't understand where your voice lies in that room, or you're afraid of where your voice lies in that room. You know what I mean? And that was such a powerful revelation, because although I've been in professional settings, I've talked to like top Fortune 500 companies. I've done partnerships and meetings with everyone. I realized that the corporate setting specifically is very different, and a different level of communication is often used in that space. So I remember that day she said to me, "Why don't you write down everything that you thought about the company and send it?" And I was like, you know what? I'm gonna try that. I wrote down pages and pages and pages, not pages, but like it was a long ass email, and I sent it to my peers in the group, and they, well, not in the I don't work for the companies, just partner. I sent it to them, and they was like, "Wow, this is so insightful. I really appreciate it." And the response I got was so dope. So they didn't end up investing in the company. Um, the company did go on to get acquired by Snapchat. So that was my bad. I probably made the wrong call there, you know what I'm saying, in some capacity. But it allowed me to see that regardless of what room you are, if you have invested time in your education, if you've invested in your knowledge, if you kind of like invested to be in that room, you're in that room for a reason. And do not be afraid to articulate that reason. Not just articulate, but more importantly, own that reason. Do you get what I'm saying? I feel like when we come to the concept of authenticity, I'll just be real. We're too afraid to not cater, especially as I don't know what the composition of the group is, but especially the black community, we're too afraid to not cater to the accepted standard. But if you have learned the thing and you've been invited into that room, you have as much credibility as anyone else. And I say this because as part of like just my process, I take people, that I know, my friends and family, and we go into these rooms, and sometimes they're afraid to tell their story. So for me, sometimes it's not just about being able to have the correct answer. There's no correct answer, but your perspective on a situation is just as powerful as anyone else's. You know what I mean? There's no way that someone else can discredit you on the basis that you have a specific voice that is not I don't want to use a bad word, that is unique to them, or a voice that they don't understand. And I feel like more of us need to step in these rooms, be unapologetically authentic with who we are, but also understand the value that you bring to the table in every single room. Before you step into a room, you can ask yourself, why I'm in this room. I'm in here for a reason, and I am allowed to put forward that reason. I am allowed to own that reason. Because I think too often we get marginalized, and we know what it's like. You know what I mean? Sometimes you don't want to talk too much in a meeting because it's like, oh, people are going to assume this. And sometimes, but when you talk too little, they assume this anyway. So what is there for you to lose? And this is not just about meetings in which you're working capacity, but this is when you're in positions of leverage, or where you're in places where you can fundamentally have the opportunity to shape your future. Shit, I should have said that later. That's a perfect segue into the poem that I wanted to recite for you guys. But importantly, don't discredit your story. Understand your perspective and know that you're qualified. And in that qualification also comes the power of saying to people, nah, this is not right, or I can't do that. You know what I mean? I've seen so many people, that a lot of younger people that I advise when they're in a corporate setting, the hardest hurdle they come across is saying no, because they feel like they have to be everyone and they have to be everything for everyone. When really, when you know what you're there for, you don't need to overcompensate to anybody. Um, yeah, sorry, I'll cut that short because I realize this is the 30-minute conversation, and I do want to get to some questions if people are listening. But I do have a poem that I want to share with you guys. I wouldn't be a creative if I didn't share a little piece. If I didn't go off a little bit. So this piece is called "Create the Future," and it's literally about what I'm talking about: not being afraid to own your ideas, own your narrative, and put yourself in a position of leverage. Ah, man, I'm really waiting for a round of applause. This is so distinct to me, but let's make this run. Um, is Kike coming? I'm about to launch. Oh,
No,
I'm about to launch.
you're meant to do the poem, but I'm
Yeah.
watching. Ignore me.
Oh, you're watching. Okay. Okay. Cool. Yeah, cool, man. Let me get into this. In 1926, Dr. Lee D. Forrest had the following to say about the future of television. While theoretically and technically television may be feasible, commercially and financially, it's an impossibility and a development on which we should spend little time dreaming. In 1977, Ken Olsen, founder of DEC, was quoted as saying, "There is no reason why anyone would ever want a home computer." In 1876, Western Union rejected the telephone, saying the idea is idiotic on the face of it and we would not recommend its purchase. What did Instagram see that Kodak didn't? Because Kodak at its peak had about 140,000 employees when Instagram, with only 13, sold for about $1 billion. You know what's funny? The scientists at Kodak actually helped develop the digital camera that would eventually take them out of business. So why, when that was developing in potential, was Kodak stuck developing pictures? Something that you created ends up becoming one of your biggest opponents. Man, looking back through the timeline, that must have been one hell of a Kodak moment. HMV, one of the world leaders at its peak, declared bankruptcy. And what do you expect? You could probably get the whole of HMV on the USB. Are you starting to see what these companies have in common? None of them were crazy enough to believe that they could invest in the future. We get to this point where they're like, if it's not broke, why fix it? There's no reason to reinvent the wheel. Forgetting that all skyscrapers were once just slabs of stone. Google was once just a scrap of codes. If you look at it from a perspective that's logical, the only true path to your dreams is to perceive what other people call impossible. Because I can tell you that it's not too far-fetched that there's a kid in an apartment developing some kind of app that will change the world and put everybody else's job in the past tense. Because it's only crazy people that embrace what others tend to fear. I bet Kodak wish they'd had someone standing at the end of the line with a sign saying the end is near. Because everything that we saw in Star Wars and labeled insanity is now a potential reality, except for the lightsaber. But I do have this idea with a broom and a laser. And if there's investors watching, we can discuss that later. But all I'm saying is that we often start off as crazy, but as time goes on, we shoot for the stars, but leave our guns on safety. And we never realize when it's happening. A man sent me an email called "Why I Hate the Internet." He said he felt the internet was harmful and it was killing human interaction. But then he said, could we talk about it on Zoom? And he'd appreciate if I followed him on Twitter. I could check his LinkedIn to see if he was verified, and then I could also find out more about his campaign on his website. If you look at the world, you'll see that old ideas saved it, current ones sustained it, but it's the crazy one that changed it. If you don't change, you don't grow. If you don't grow, you aren't living. Gel Shihi. So this is my message to you all. Appreciate the past, utilize the present, but don't be afraid to create the future. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it, man. Appreciate your time, my peoples.
Wow. That was incredible. That was what I got from that is innovation is key. If you don't innovate, you'll die. That's what I got from it. Is that kind of what you were trying to bring out?
Yeah, in a way, I feel like if you keep on like the standards in it, you know what I mean? There's set standards, there's set expectations, and we're living in a day and age where the limits that you place on yourselves are the ones that will define you. You know what I'm saying? And I feel like too often we walk into rooms and we already step into the boxes that already fit there. Do you get what I'm saying? So it's an interesting space to be in, you know, but you know, who am I? Each to their own.
Another example is always the Netflix versus Blockbuster, right? Like, you know,
Yeah.
these companies that just didn't innovate, and now these startups have you know, accelerated. And it reminds me of what William said earlier as well about, like, where can we be? Like, Singapore is less than 67 years old. Where can we be in 67 years as a Black community? We need to start innovating, and we can kill whatever competition that's out there now. So it's like we can't limit our mindsets. Yeah. That's
and I've seen it happening. You know, I mean, it's happening every day in certain rooms. You get what I'm saying? So you have to embody that, even if you're not in those rooms, because you never know when you're going to be in them. You know?
Yeah, exactly. So we have some questions. We only have minutes. Let me start with Nicola White. She said, "Can you ask Suli whether you can be at the top of an organization in a leadership role and still have/show a personality?" The reason she asks is because many leaders she sees are completely unapproachable and lack personality.
I see. Yeah, I agree with her. I feel like a lot of leaders that I know are the same way. And I'm not going to put it against them, because I feel like the more personal you get with groups, the more lines get blurred. What I feel like is you don't have to, you don't have to have personality, but you can definitely have values. You know what I mean? I feel like the most important thing is you can be in a leadership role and have values, and that's what I've seen consistently. Because I know a lot of leaders outside of their professional settings, and they're very different to how they are when I step in the office with them. And I think that's because they need to establish certain boundaries, and that's how they get the team to function. But what I've noticed the distinction is the ones that have value. So when it comes to stuff like, giving staff members, like, you know, time off, or, you know, adherent, like kind of being aware of their like social kind of like responsibilities, or the other issues that they have, you know, their personal issues. That's why I think you can always have values in that context. And the best leaders I've seen, they're not necessarily the most personal in their businesses, but they're definitely the most value-led.
Yeah, amazing. And this whole conference is a leadership conference. So everybody watching, we want you to be leaders. We want you to go forward, even though it's hard, even though it literally won't be easy, but at least back yourself. And again, this conference has been very much about no limits, no mindset limits, no, you know, none of that. We can all be who we want to be. And then the next question we have from Quadwo is, how hard is it for you to manage families' expectations when you decided to go for the creative side? Did you avoid any conversations? And he wants answers because he knows others who are going through the same challenges.
Yeah, they're never going to get it until the bag drops. I'm not going to lie to you. Let me just be honest with you as my brother. I'm just being real with you. You know what I mean? And, okay, so it doesn't have to be like monetary, but it has to be some level of kind of like... Sorry, hello?
Yeah, he's still there.
Am I still here?
Yeah. You're still there.
Sorry, guys. Am I still here?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Sorry, I forgot all of this is connected to my phone and stuff like that, and you know, and I'm getting calls and stuff like that. Apologies.
That's fine.
But yeah, no, but what one the key difference maker for me when I was in that situation is my mother in particular. She was able to see my commitment towards the cause. Like, I was one of them people that I'd go to work, do my job, but then I'd come home and 8 hours I'm in front of the computer editing. I'm saying, and that made her realize that this is something that is not, he's not expecting it to happen overnight, but it's also something that requires work. And once they started to see that work commitment, she started to ask me questions. Why are you spending so much? You know, I wasn't one of them people that would come in and just go out with my, you know, and I feel like I was very visible about the effort that I was putting in. And I think eventually she started to be like, oh, I'm going to listen to your stuff. I'm going to see where you're coming from. So I feel like that's one of the things we do. When there's normally opposition, we just go off on our own path and say, leave me alone. But sometimes communicating that journey, everybody respects hard work. Even if there's no output, everybody respects hard work. And I feel like that is the most powerful communication out of everything when it comes to like being a creative and family, really not supporting. And then when the thing pops off, then, you know, then you can use it.
When the bag drops.
Give me 1 second. I can't hear you for some reason. I don't know why I can't hear you.
I just wanted to again to say to the audience, we heard that earlier with Yemi Lalude about hard work, right? Hard work matters. I know some people in the audience.
I actually can't hear you. Sorry, 1 second.
Well. No worries.
Oh man, this I really is it.
Okay, we're closing off now anyway.
My mother-in-law called me and she just messed up the whole thing, bro. Can we do a sign language kind of situation? What were you up?
It's
It's
over.
done.
It's
I like
done.
that one. That's like a Beyonce thing, Coachella. It's over and out. I like that. Coachella, yeah. Let me drop the mic.
So it is pretty much over. Obviously, Suli can't even hear me right now, but that was amazing. And we still have till 6 o'clock today. So please do go over to the corporate booths. Like we said, they are hiring. You have over 30 partners right now looking to talk to you in the audience. So take time, go over there. I'll be giving a closing round of around 5:15. But this is pretty much open for you to network with everyone. I hope you've enjoyed the day. Like, it's not even over. We have a whole day again tomorrow. How exciting is that? And it makes sense because I don't know how we could end today just now. Like, there's so much gems dropped. We need more gems tomorrow. So thank you all so much. And like I said, go over to the booths, meet our corporate partners. They want to speak to you. And I'll see you again soon. And thank you, Suli. Not that you can hear me, but we're over and out.
Okay, cool.